Hi friends, welcome to Organic True Crime with Sydney Hopes, where I talk about interesting true crime stories. This month I've been focusing on killer couples, and last week I talked about Bonnie and Clyde, which is probably a story that we all know. But did you know about Buck and Blanche? Buck was Clyde's older brother, and he and his wife Blanche were also part of the Barrow gang, and they were also committing crimes right alongside Bonnie and Clyde. Marvin Ivan Barrow, or Buck, was born in 1903 to Henry and Cumie Barrow. He was the third of an eventual 9 children, and the family was very poor and had a very small farm until eventually they did lose the farm, and they actually had to live under a wagon for a period of time until they could afford to buy a tent, and then the family lived in a tent. Buck dropped out of school by the time he was 9 years old, and when he turned 18, he moved to Dallas, Texas with plans of working on cars with his older brother. But that's not really what happened. It didn't take long for Buck to fall in with the wrong crowd, and he started participating in illegal activities to make his money. Buck was married 2 times before Blanche, but I couldn't really find a whole lot of information about those first marriages. I did find that in his first marriage they had twins, and one of the twins died at 15 months. And then in his second marriage he had a daughter. And during both marriages he was stealing cars and reselling them to make money. That was how he was supporting his family. And that's about all I could really find about Buck's early life until 1926 when he was arrested for the first time. He and his brother Clyde were caught stealing turkeys around the holidays. They were planning to sell them. And they were arrested and jailed for 1 week. Now to switch gears a little bit, Benny Iva Caldwell, or Blanche, was born on New Year's Day in 1911 to Lillian and Matthew. Her parents divorced when she was very young, and she grew up on her father's farm with a very complicated relationship with her mother. An example of that complicated relationship would be when her mother arranged for Blanche to marry a much older man who had offered a reward for the marriage. He basically was just going to pay Lillian in order to marry her daughter. And this is when Blanche ran away to Dallas, Texas. And I'm not really sure if she ran away before or after the marriage, because some sources said that she was running from her husband and some said that she was running from the arrangement. So I'm not really sure. But she did run away to Dallas, Texas. Which brings us to 1929 when Buck and Blanche met and immediately fell in love. Unfortunately, very shortly after they met, Buck was involved in a robbery where he was shot and then arrested, and I'm not sure where he was shot, but he did recover, and he was eventually sentenced to 5 years in jail. Buck couldn't handle being away from Blanche for that long, so he escaped. And his escape, he literally just walked out the front door, and then he stole a guard's car and he drove home. Buck and Blanche hid out together, and they planned and committed robberies in order to make money while they were hiding out. And in 1931, the two got married. And then after that, Blanche convinced Buck to go back to jail and turn himself in. So Blanche and Buck's mother, Cumie, drove Buck back to jail, where he was now supposed to serve 6 years. And because of that, because Blanche took him back to jail, it's told, and because of what she claimed afterwards, she's kind of seen as like she didn't want to have anything to do with the criminal lifestyle. She just went along with it because she was so in love with Buck and would do anything, and she was sure she could save him and convince him to stop. And I'm just not really sure how I feel about that, because she was part of the robberies too. She helped him, she planned them, she admitted to that. And I guess she could have just been influenced by him and willing to do whatever he wants. But I don't know, she did it too. So I have a hard time. It's really easy to, after you're caught, say, well, I didn't mean it. I was just doing it for him. Maybe she was. But also very much maybe she wasn't. Anyway, in 1933, Buck actually received a full pardon and was released from jail with no criminal record except for that one time he got arrested stealing turkeys. And shortly after Buck's release, Bonnie and Clyde came to stay. Now at this point, the Barrow gang had already been formed and was being led by Bonnie and Clyde, and they were all on the run because Clyde was wanted for murder. And Buck and Blanche joined the Barrow gang. Now, Blanche says that they joined because they had plans to convince Clyde to stop committing crimes. But we don't really know that, you know? We do know that Buck was very, very much involved in all of the Barrow gang's crimes after being released from jail. And Blanche also says that she knew Buck was going to join whether she did or not, and he was her husband, so she went with him. And I see that. I do believe that because at this point, she was not involved in any of the robberies, and she basically just ended up being everyone's mom. She was just cleaning up for everyone and cooking for them while they went out and stole cars and robbed banks. And unsurprisingly, she didn't really like that a whole lot, you know? So while the gang was staying in Missouri with Buck, Blanche, Bonnie, Clyde, and W.D. Jones, they were supposed to be laying low, but they really weren't, and they ended up attracting some attention. They were a pretty rowdy group, and Clyde actually accidentally fired a gun in their apartment at one point, so eventually police were called to investigate. But the Barrow gang kind of knew it was coming. They knew it was going to happen eventually, so they were somewhat prepared. They had all the windows covered, and when police arrived, Blanche had a code word that she said, I don't remember what it was, but she had a code word that she said, which signaled Clyde to sneak into the garage of their apartment where he could look out of some of the windows that they didn't have covered, and he could start shooting at police officers without any warning, and they couldn't see him. And that's what they did. And a full shootout between the Barrow gang and the police started. And when it did, Buck and Blanche had a dog named Snowball, and Snowball went running down the street and Blanche went running after it. And during the shootout, Buck was grazed with a bullet. I guess it apparently bounced off a wall and just kind of hit him, so he was pretty much fine. W.D. Jones was hit, but not seriously, and he also recovered. And Clyde, amazingly enough, I can't get over this, they hit him, but the button on his suit coat deflected it, bounced off, and he was fine. Isn't that insane? But unfortunately, 2 police officers were killed in the incident, and the entire Barrow gang got away. While they were driving away, they stopped down the street and pulled Blanche into the car and continued on. But nobody says what happened to Snowball, which really bothers me. So like I said, they were kind of expecting this, so they were like sort of packed, but they didn't know when the ambush was going to happen, so they did still leave some things behind in the apartment. And when police searched the apartment, Stella, she has her face in my shirt. Anyway, when police searched the apartment, they found Buck and Blanche's marriage license, which is how they officially identified the two as being part of the Barrow gang. And they also found a reel of undeveloped photos, and they had these photos developed and then published in newspapers so that now the world not only knew that they were looking for a gang of 5, but they knew what their faces looked like, and awareness was raised, which made things really difficult for the Barrow gang because now everyone knew what they looked like and everyone knew that they were a group of 5 traveling together with 2 women and 3 men. By the way, if you hear any weird noises or see any weird arm movements coming from me, my dogs are very antsy at the moment, so they're messing with things, including me. So they ended up hiding out in a tavern in Missouri, and they were claiming to be a group of 3, but the tavern owner got pretty suspicious when a woman, Blanche, wearing tight pants, kept coming downstairs and ordering 5 meals and taking it up to her room, even though she was claiming to be 3 people. Or to be with a group of 3 people. She wasn't claiming to be 3 people. Anyway, also, what they didn't know about the tavern that they chose to hide out in, it was a very popular hangout spot for local law enforcement. So they were pretty quickly discovered. And this ended in another shootout between police and the Barrow gang. And they did get away again, only this time Buck was shot in the head and was very seriously injured, and Blanche ended up having to drag him to their getaway car. And then police continued to shoot at them once they were in the car, which shattered the windshields, and that ended up permanently damaging one of Blanche's eyes and blinding her in the other. Just a warning, this next part is a little gross and graphic, so if you want to skip it, you can go to this time and not hear it. So apparently, Buck's wound, he was shot in his temple and it came out the front, so he had his brain was visible through the front of his head, and to keep it clean, they poured hydrogen peroxide or alcohol on it. But surprisingly enough, despite this very serious head wound, Buck was still occasionally coherent and had an appetite. So the gang did escape this one shootout, and they ended up kind of camping out near an abandoned theme park in Iowa, on the very edge of Iowa. But they were pretty quickly discovered, and another shootout happened here. And at this point, Buck was injured again, and he couldn't run anymore. And Blanche decided to stay with him while the rest of the gang got away. So Buck and Blanche were arrested at this point. There's actually a photo of Blanche right after she was captured. I guess when someone took out a camera to take a picture, she thought it was a gun that was being shot at her, so she's screaming in the photo. But Buck was taken to the hospital where he was given stimulants so that he could answer police's questions because, like I said, he was still kind of coherent. And he did sort of answer their questions and ate. Buck's mother, Cumi, was brought to the hospital. The sheriff's office actually paid to have her travel to see Buck before he passed away. And he did develop pneumonia. And then on July 29th of 1933, he died from pneumonia and complications from his multiple wounds. A little odd little note about this. I just thought it was really interesting. So when Buck died, his parents decided not to have a funeral or purchase a gravestone yet because they pretty much knew Clyde was not far behind. They knew what kind of life he was living couldn't last very long. And Clyde actually agreed with them. And so they decided just to wait and that they would get a shared gravestone for the two of them, which they did do. And again, Clyde agreed with. I just thought that was really odd, very interesting way to think of it, which, I mean, it's very practical. They didn't have a lot of money for multiple gravestones, so I guess it makes sense, but sad. And on their gravestone, Buck's birth date is actually wrong. It says that he was born in 1905, but the Barrow family kept all of the records of their children's births in their family Bible, and the family Bible showed that he had been born in 1903, and it was actually his sister who was born in 1905, and their mother just mixed it up when she was giving information for the gravestone. Fun fact. Blanche was arrested and sentenced to 10 years in jail, but she was actually released in 1939 after serving only 6 years. And the next year, she married a man named Eddie Frazier, and the two ended up adopting a 12-year-old boy named Ricky after Blanche suffered from several miscarriages. And then in 1969, Eddie passed away, leaving just Blanche and Ricky, who apparently had a very difficult and complicated relationship until in 1988, when Blanche was 77 years old, she passed away from lung cancer. And that is Buck and Blanche Barrow. I had never heard of them. I've heard of Bonnie and Clyde. I know their whole story, but I didn't know that there was another couple, another pair of lovers who were also in this gang that just, I don't know, weren't as popular. They didn't have as dramatic of a death as Bonnie and Clyde, I guess. I don't know, but they were right alongside doing it too. Anyway, I hope you thought that was interesting too. Had you heard of them before? Let me know. And I'll see you guys next week for a different killer couple. Bye.